Well, I think the long story short is Terry and I were involved in looking for a co-working space in Portland for years, and it seemed like years. It was probably a year and a half, 2 years. And the co-working space was really about bringing like all industries together under one roof. So not just one industry, not just tech, not just programmers, but could you pull the Otratis and pull the tech programmers and pull some of the foodies into one space? That kind of fizzled out a little bit. But out of that came up the idea of Built Oregon, and I own the URL. And I looked at Terry and I was like, I'll tell you what, let's start a digital magazine that tells the story of what's happening around the state, all industries, all geos, and we'll just launch it. And so
we're talking today about building communities, and I think, we had this concept of what we wanted to do, right? We said, we sat around over beers and coffee and said, well, beers and coffee or soft drinks or whatever. Whatever you want, Starbucker and everything. So we were like, there's a lot of stories out there about entrepreneurs, right? And it's like, well, why should we tell more? And I think Mitch nailed it when we said, well, I don't think there's enough. And I think if you watch the video and listen to what the video has to say, the basic premise of what we wanted to do is to say that, yes, there's all this activity going out there. There's all this creativity. There's all these entrepreneurs out there doing cool things. But there's not enough stories being told about these kind of companies. Yes, there's a lot of tech going on out there, and there's a lot of activity here, but there's a whole rest of the state. And then there was the whole issue of how does the geography play into that and the sense of place. And
I think we did also see, one of the things that was super important was there are plenty of stories about the what. Like the so-and-so raised $5 million, so-and-so hired this employee, but there's very little about the why. Like, what inspired them to do this in the first place? What inspires them to get out of bed every day? What problems do they encounter, and why do they continue to kind of soldier forward to build these companies? And we weren't hearing those stories. We were hearing more like quantifiable stories, not qualitative stories. And so we really wanted to dig into, whether you've heard of the company or not, what's the inspiration? Like one of my favorites that we have on the site right now is Dutch Brothers, which is a well-known coffee company. I think the word coffee comes up maybe once in that entire post. It's all about like why they did it and what inspired them and what drove the company. And that's the kind of thing that builds community.
They play from like an agency standpoint. How do you build that like online community when you're not kind of following the trends out there?
When we came in, really the foundation or the goal was to create a foundation for them, a platform for them to tell these stories and to get those stories out there. Because really we just wanted eyeballs on them. We wanted to read these, like they were saying, these stories are inspiring and they're deep and there's a lot of emotional ties to them, and they go into the why, which is like Rick said, hardly touched. So it was really about just getting the distribution, building that foundation, getting it across as many channels as possible on social. When I'm creating these posts that go up, sharing these stories, I try to get to the heart at what the story's about, making sure that's in that title, making sure, most importantly, if I were to see that, would I click on it? Would I want to read it? I think that's definitely important. I think a lot of posts that go out sometimes don't necessarily do that. So making sure that it's intriguing first and foremost, and making sure that image is relevant to the post. But it's tough. It definitely can be tough. So
somebody's going to click our Twitter feed and sign up, or go become a member, or say, this is something that I want to be a part of. So that is the connective tissue that you're always trying to get with telling the story.
I think Kickstarter is like that, especially when you're building like a community. It's that test. Like you're putting your idea out there, and this passion and this video and your story, you have no idea if it's actually going to be supported. And so you're hoping it's going to be supported. So when it does get supported, it gives you this feeling that like what you're doing and kind of this vision of what you have going actually makes sense. So I think the reason to do Kickstarter rather than just try and like raise money from people that we knew was we had 320 people now backing this idea. It was around the state, different industries. And so that actually led us to like the confidence to go ahead and launch the magazine and build this community.
Well, I think the voice, like testing the voice of what we thought Built Oregon was going to be, I think that was, we had an idea, not Pinky's voice, but like a voice of that story and like how to tell it. Like that was a really good way of testing the waters and figuring out if, were we crazy or was this actually going to resonate with the market?
I mean, there's nothing like, I guess, spending the month or two we spent, thinking it all through, writing. Kickstarter's a kind of a great platform for that, right? Because you got to write your story. You got to put down on the page what you're offering, what's your premise, and what are the gifts or the goodies that you're giving away. But the key to it, I think, was that video. And for a lot of reasons, not so much because of how it turned out. I think, from our perspective, it really was one of the most helpful things we could have possibly done to clarify the message that we wanted to put out there. And so for any of you that are thinking of, trying to build a community around something, whatever it is, a product, whatever, to take the time to sit down, and I remember these sessions that we had with Jonathan talking about storyboarding this out. There's nothing more valuable, really, to sit down and sit there, okay, how do we want to tell the story in 3 minutes? Because you can't tell that in 3 minutes and storyboard it out, even if you're never even going to do the video. Just write a storyboard for 3 minutes for the idea that you have or the product that you have. I can tell you it's the most valuable exercise you could ever do. And maybe if you have the resources, you could do the video and ultimately put it on your site. But we were lucky enough. And I can't tell you the process of doing that and actually being with these entrepreneurs and watching what they did. It just like crystallized it. It's just like, wow, this is right. This is the right thing to do.
We got emails from Hydro Flask, Roughwear, all over the state saying, love the video. I'd say half of them became backers in the $100 to $500 range. So to me, like that validated what we were doing for the companies around the state. That they saw that, they participated, and then they backed it.
Well, I think it was. I mean, we were kind of broaching new territory that none of us had. We knew what the platform was, but we didn't really have the understanding of what would it be like to work with a bunch of journalists who you're assigning a bunch of opportunities to, and like how good will that copy be when you get it at first, and how much will you need to muck with it and send it back, and like what's the review cycle, and how often do we? I still don't think we figured out the publishing model. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think we're kind of testing different stuff, but there's still a lot of stuff that's just kind of like we don't know. We've never done this before, and yet we have more than 300 people who are relying on us to do this thing because they've given us capital to do it, and we're very motivated to do it, and very thankful for the patience of our subscriber base. But we're still trying to kind of figure out that dynamic for what is the best way to distribute that content. Like we haven't even figured out the media formats, right? It's like we're long form blog post right now, and we've only done a video once. So maybe video is a good format, maybe audio is a good format, and so we're still trying to kind of rough through like what's the best way to deliver this content, and what's the best way for the subscriber base to digest this content in a beautiful way.
Yeah, and I think for me, because I became the editorial person, like managing that, like just filtering the number of stories. I mean, my list is still like 300, 350 stories. Like that idea of like wanting to be the statewide, so looking for Eastern, looking for the coast, looking for Southern, like I'm not gonna say it's easy, but it's a lot easier to say we're gonna do Portland, Bend, and Eugene, Corvallis. Once you hit the coast and Eastern Oregon, there's a lot of stuff happening out there, but no one's ever kind of done the outreach to say, let's tell your story. And so to me, that was like the challenge and the opportunity at the same time was how do you organize this in a way that actually delivers content that follows up on what you promised in the Kickstarter and the video and stuff like that on an ongoing basis.